All right. I think we can get started. Thank you all for joining us for the July 2020 Patch Tuesday breakdown. My name is Jay Goodman. I'm a strategic product marketing manager here at Automox, and joining to me today is Adam Whitman. Adam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, thanks Jay. Glad to be here. My name's Adam, and I'm the senior sales engineer here, and here to support Jay and show you some cool things with Worklets. So,
Great. So just a couple quick webinar housekeeping items before we kick into it. All participants are muted to keep the audio clear. The webinar is being recorded, and everyone who registers and everyone who's attending today will get a recording of the webinar after we close. We will be doing a Q&A at the end of the demo. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function within the Zoom console at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to address as many of those questions as we can before we run out of time today. So as far as an agenda, we're going to talk about Microsoft setting yet another dubious record, talk a little bit about the Adobe releases, and then the big one, it's Wormable, it's a 10, and it's probably in your DNS. So we're going to talk about a vulnerability in Windows DNS service. And then I'll kick it over to Adam for a Worklet demo. Adam is going to actually show you how you can use a Worklet to enforce disablement of SMB v1 across all of your Windows devices automatically. And then we'll close out with the actual Q&A. So for this month's Patch Tuesday, Microsoft released a patch for Wormable vulnerability, like we mentioned, which received a CVS rating of 10.0. That's the highest severity rating possible, and the first 10.0 of 2020. July's update also features patches for 123 total vulnerabilities, with a total of 18 rated critical from Microsoft. Earlier in July, Microsoft also released an emergency disclosure and 2 patches for critical vulnerabilities. Those are also part of what you should be addressing in your Patch Tuesday fix-ups if you haven't already. In addition, Adobe released security updates to address a number of critical vulnerabilities across 5 of its tools. This month, Mozilla also released patches for Thunderbird and Firefox. July's Patch Tuesday update continues the trend of massive patching workloads, with Microsoft releasing over 100 updates for the 5th straight month, a continuing record. For many system admins, this is a real struggle to keep up with for the latest security updates, especially given the recent changes in workforce dynamics and the continued reliance on outdated endpoint management and patching solutions. The rise of remote work is here to stay, and endpoint management protocols need to keep up with the pace of the new patching the new patching paradigm that we're in. Staying up to date with the latest patches is as important as ever, if not even more so in today's world. So talking specifically about Microsoft, Microsoft included fixes for 6 different remote code execution vulnerabilities in Hyper-V alone. The vulnerabilities within Hyper-V are around failing to properly validate input from an authenticated user on a guest operating system. There are no patches for these 6 vulnerabilities, and instead the update just flat out disables remote FX when applied. CVEs 2020 1349, 1410, 1374, and 1436 are all remote code execution vulnerabilities impacting various Microsoft productivity tools like Skype, Office, Outlook, and remote desktop client. Additionally, CVEs 2020 1147, 1421, and 1403 are more remote code execution vulnerabilities in the Windows.NET framework, LNK links, and VB script. These are 3 very common services in Windows setups. They'll probably have a very high prevalence in your organization. Successful exploit of these vulnerabilities can allow attackers to gain access to data, install new programs, create new user accounts, and potentially run other malicious code within your environment. One more critical vulnerability this month that we're highlighting is CVE 2020-1025. It is an elevation of privilege vulnerability impacting Microsoft's Lync server, SharePoint 2016, SharePoint 2019, and Skype for Business server 2015 and 2019. Successful exploitation could allow for bypassing OAuth token validation and providing malicious actors with access to a victim's machine. Next up, we're going to look at critical Adobe updates. July brought several critical vulnerability updates to both Adobe Download Manager and Media Encoder, which address critical vulnerabilities CVE 2020-9688, 9646, and 9650. These could lead to arbitrary code execution, or ACE. CVE 2020-9682 impacts Creative Cloud Desktop, and if exploited, could allow an attacker to create or modify files on the target system. They also addressed vulnerabilities exposed in Cold Fusion, Genuine Service, and Creative Cloud Desktop to prevent attackers from leveraging privilege escalation vulnerabilities in those services. So I want to talk a little bit about what arbitrary code execution really is. And what ACE is, it can allow attackers to execute commands or code on a device or within a process. On its own, ACE exploits are fairly limited in scope due to the fact that they're bound by the privileges of the affected process. However, when you combine privilege escalation vulnerabilities with ACE, it can allow an attacker to quickly escalate a process's privileges and execute code on the target system, giving the attacker full control over the device. With the average organization taking 107 days to patch a new vulnerability, and the amount of both ACE vulnerabilities and privilege escalation vulnerabilities in Adobe tools, it is very likely that there are now organizations with both ACE and privilege escalation vulnerabilities present on corporate devices that could create a pretty nasty storm for attackers to exploit. Next up, we'll take a look at what Firefox and Chrome have been doing. So Firefox 78 and 7802 addressed manifest poisoning, memory corruption, and use after free vulnerabilities within Firefox, as well as some minor improvements to the RSA key generation vulnerabilities to side channel attacks within the browser. Use after free specifically refers to attempts to access memory after it's been freed, which can cause a program to crash, or in the case of use after free flaws, can potentially result in the execution of arbitrary code or even enable full remote code execution capabilities. Manifest poisoning actually relates to DNS, and we'll get into a little bit more about DNS shortly, but Firefox is addressing Mozilla is addressing some of the vulnerabilities within Firefox related to manifest poisoning. Additionally, for Thunderbird, Mozilla addressed some memory corruption and more use after free vulnerabilities present in that client as well. Google's Chrome 84 update fixed 38 total vulnerabilities this month, including one critical one, that's CVE 2020-6510, which is a heap buffer overflow vulnerability tied to Chrome's background fetch function. Given the prevalence of both Chrome and Firefox across many organizations, patching your browsers on your endpoints remains a pretty critical thing to address. So let's talk about Microsoft's CVE 2020-1350, also known as SIGRED. SIGRED is a wormable remote code execution vulnerability that exists in Microsoft's DNS Server role implementation and affects all Windows Server versions. Microsoft has given this vulnerability a CVSS base score of 10 due to it being a wormable vulnerability stemming from a flaw in the Microsoft DNS Server implementation. Non-Microsoft DNS servers are not affected by this vulnerability. Attackers can exploit this vulnerability by sending specially crafted packets to a vulnerable Windows DNS server and running arbitrary code within the context of the local system account. This can give attackers full control of the system, as well as giving them the ability to leverage the server as a distribution point, hence the wormability. This would allow a malicious actor to spread malware quickly between systems without any need for user interaction. The wormability capacity of SIGRED greatly increases its severity and potential impact. With this vulnerability, attackers can write ransomware similar to the likes of WannaCry or NotPetya. Microsoft ranks exploitation for this vulnerability as more likely as well, which means it will be a very attractive target for attackers. Um, as one of the more popular DNS server setups in the world, it really is absolutely critical to mitigate and remediate this vulnerability as soon as possible. A successful attack via specially crafted packets really can quickly exploit the machine and leave you vulnerable. Um, and while DNS is critical infrastructure, it is often neglected when it comes to updates and patching. Due to the criticality of this vulnerability, as well as the likelihood of exploit, the short-term impact of taking this service offline will far outweigh the long-term impact of successfully exploited servers. Um, we at Automox have the ability to both automatically patch this for you, and in addition, we do have a remediation component that's available, or a mitigation component that's available on the Automox community. It's a worklet script that'll help to limit packet size in Windows DNS, which is a short-term fix that will give you some more time to address actually taking the DNS server out of commission for the patch and then restarting it. And again, like for remediation, Automox really helps you. We're your friend. Automation is your friend. And this vulnerability was discovered by Checkpoint, discovered and disclosed by Checkpoint to Microsoft, and the primary researcher on it, Omri Herskovitsky, in an interview, straight up said it's basically game over for a lot of Windows DNS systems. So, given the criticality of that, we decided to take a look at Automark's customers this morning. We found that 25.4% of all customers have at least one exposure to CVE 2020-1350 or SIGRID. That being said, we have already seen 7,500 systems patched as of 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time this morning. That means that we've been patching 5 devices per minute for the last 24 hours continuously. Unfortunately, what this also means is that to meet that 72-hour threshold, you now only have about 48 and a half hours remaining to do so. And given the fact that most organizations spend 38 hours per week to manually patch, this is going to be a major lift for non-Automox customers. So we're here to help you. We're here to help automate and accelerate this process. Get out there, get this one patched. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Adam for the SMB V1 disabling worklet demo. Adam, 1 second, let me stop sharing and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jay, and great data around what we pulled out of our database around what's, people that are currently remediating this exploit, and also those who are still exposed. So great data there. So thanks for having me again, everyone. And again, my name's Adam Whitman, and I'm here to kind of give you a demo of how to disable SMB V1 across your Windows devices. So it's pretty easy. You can do it both for Windows 7 and Windows 10, and it's all supported through Worklets. Okay, so let me share my screen out. Okay, Jay, so you should be seeing this. Can you confirm that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, so let me share this really fast, and I just want to give a quick overview of what SMB is. So SMB is a server message block, and this is a protocol, a network protocol used for communication in internal and external subnets for various devices like file shares, printers, and other things that you may need access to. And a lot of the security aspects around SMB are controlled in this protocol. So SMB1 was first designed 30 years ago, and it's really no longer adequate in providing security in a modern network infrastructure. And this really goes without saying, because there's so many different exploits that are getting more and more complex. Way that you can inject arbitrary code the code that is being sent is just a lot, it's better at attacking the devices, and you need stronger protocols to actually protect your devices. So what the later SMB versions offer that are not offered in SMB1 are things like pre-authentication integrity. So think about that. These are things like authenticating you through logins, through passwords, through API calls, various ways that are done. All that's controlled through SMB. So if you have SMB v1, just know the integrity of your pre-authentication is going to be compromised. And other things you can see here, things like insecure guest auth blocking, encryption, message signing. These are important security protocols that you got to make sure that are maintained across your devices. And SMB1 just does not do an adequate job doing that. So Automox recommends that you make sure that SMB v1 is disabled and you're at least running SMB v2 or SMB v3 across both your Windows 10 and Windows 7 devices. So if you go to our community page, community.automox.com, I've recently posted a worklet called Disabling SMB v1 across your Windows devices. And this will essentially give you the code needed for evaluation and remediation for both Windows 7 and Windows 10 devices. So Windows 7 is pretty easy. You change your reg value, and with Windows 10, you can enable, you can take advantage of something called the Windows optional feature, CMDLit, and that allows you to actually change those settings for us. And all the codes here, so evaluation is going to evaluate and see if SMB1 is enabled or disabled. If it is enabled on any of those devices, it'll just simply exit with a 1 and then run remediation. Remediation is designed to actually do the disabling of SMB. Okay, so we're looking first. We're going to look in the Automox console here. And right now we're looking at a device. So we're in the device details page of the Automox console. And you can see by the display name, we're looking at AX Host 2-Pro. This is a Windows 10 device running Windows 10 Pro. If you look at this device, we've already ran the host name command. So we're looking at the virtual machine for this host inside of ESXi. And you can see that we've ran the host name command, and that displays our host name, AX Host 2 Pro. So we know we have the right device. And up here, I'm going to run a command. And this is the command that's ran during evaluation, and that's going to determine if SMB v1 is enabled or disabled. So we simply run this command here. It's going to go ahead and run, and it's going to tell us that it's currently enabled. So if evaluation exits with an enabled, it's going to exit with a 1, and it's going to go ahead and try to run remediation to actually execute that and change it to disabled. So let's go back into Automox. Since we're on this device, we can see all the associated policies. Now, the great thing about Automox policies is they run on a proactive approach based on the schedule that you've configured in the policy. However, you can run these policies at any point in time. That's across all the groups of devices or on a single group. So we're looking at a device. We can see the entire policy inventory based on this device's group membership, and we could run these devices. We can run these policies on these devices. So right here, we're looking at the worklet, disable SMB v1 on Windows 10 devices. And I also have a Windows 7 one created as well for my Windows 7 devices. And all you have to do is assign this to all of your Windows 7 and Windows 10 devices, and you can run it on a daily basis, and it's always going to make sure that SMB v1 is disabled across your infrastructure. And that's automatically going to reduce your attack surface and increase your security posture. So we can see right here, based on the policy, it's in a current pending state, meaning that it shows this device as having SMB v1 enabled. And we've already confirmed that here. By looking at the command we ran, we can see that it's already enabled. So let's go ahead and run this on the device. So you can run the policy on just this device, and we're going to change that value and make sure that we're disabling SMB v1. So I'll just have to click is run device. It'll give me a confirm check to run, and that's it. And the next that happens is after this worklet runs, it's going to reevaluate and rescan the device to determine if SMB v1 has in fact been enabled or disabled. Now, if we go back to the device, now we should be able to run this command again, and it's saying enabled, it should show disabled if the worklet ran correctly. So let's go ahead and run it again. Okay. And we now see that is actually showing as disabled. So now that the worklet ran, it's as easy as that. Just took a few seconds to make that change, And now we can see that it's disabled. So once our rescan finishes here, this will only take a few minutes, we'll now show that it's already, the policy is compliant, because now that we've reevaluated, so we've ran that evaluation code again, we can determine that SMB has been disabled, and we can now mark that policy as compliant for this device, which we've already done. And that's it. So I would recommend getting, if you are interested to see, you could just evaluate and not remediate. So check check to see what your current state is, check to see if you do have any infected devices. And if you do, go ahead and remediate, and it'll go ahead and disable that across your devices. And the code's available here at community.automox.com. Simply copy and paste it into your own policies, and you can run it across your devices. Okay, Jay, so that's all I wanted to share.
Spectacular. Let me grab the screen back from you quickly. All right, so thank you, Adam, for walking us through how to disable SMBv1 on your systems, helping you kind of address some of the vulnerabilities and exploits that are around SMBv1. We're going to now kick it off to Q&A. And like I said, please add any of your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom. We'll be glad to answer them. The first one I see right offhand is from Jonathan. And I've already answered this one in chat, but I'll go ahead and address it again for everyone else. If the 2020-07 patch is applied to AD-DNS servers, it's my understanding that the registry change is not necessary. Is that your understanding as well? So what Jonathan's talking about here, I believe, is the SIGRED vulnerability and the mitigation worklet that we've provided. So the mitigation worklet is really just a mitigation tool. It's for those that can't take the entire server offline right now. And all it does is it changes a registry key to limit the packet size, which will address the vulnerability in the short term, and then restart the Windows DNS service on that box. That is only a mitigation component and not a long-term fix, but is there for our customers who need to at least do something to address this vulnerability while they plan taking the actual system out of commission temporarily to patch and address. But like I said, we highly recommend that you patch first, and this is a mitigating factor that can be used for those who don't have the ability to do that within the next 48 and a half hours. Rob Fink has a question. Can the worklet be used on Macs and or Linux? So the SIGRED worklet is specific to Windows DNS. However, we can push any given worklet out across Windows, Mac, or Linux. So in Windows, it's a PowerShell script. In Mac and Linux, it's a Bash script. So yes, we can address we can address any of your needs via worklet. So Rob, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm not quite following the SMD worklet question, I guess. There, I got you set up to.
Thanks. No, the SMB v1 worklet we were looking at, can that be used for Macs and Linux?
Yeah, so I don't have the code for that right now written, but it's something I can research and post to the community. So that's something I'll take on and try to make sure I got parity across all the other OSs for that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep.
All right, well, I don't see any other questions. Thank you all for joining us today, and we really appreciate everyone sticking around for some Q&A with us. As always, if you have any additional questions, feel free to send them our way. We'll get them answered. And as always, follow us on social media. We have accounts on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Spiceworks, and Twitter.